Hello and welcome to Target Marketing with MIAA. This is the first in a three-part series where we're going to cover how to sell commercial lines. And the first part of selling commercial lines is developing your marketing program and laying the foundation of what is going to turn out to be a successful program that you're going to use. So, first things first. Give me a target. This simply means that the carriers are going to try to feed you a lot of meaningless information in the form of appetite guides that you're going to want to throw in the trash can. But what you are going to want to do are request target marketing lists from the carriers that you have access to, which are the top 10 target marketing lists or hit lists. And these are the types of businesses that they are often selling. This is what they're actually doing well, not what they can quote or what they can quote without giving you an error message. I'm talking about what are they quite often or most frequently ending up with the result of sale. This is one of the primary things that you want to have to generate your marketing campaign, because if you're going after markets that you don't even have an accurate tool that you can use to sell it or get a quote that's competitive, it's completely pointless. You're going to actually end up just with a lot of frustration and a lot of writer's cramp filling out applications. So, first things first, give me a target and let's generate that with those carrier target market lists. Now, we have saved you a lot of work because we've actually canvassed the carriers for you, and we've generated a spreadsheet that has on it, what are the target markets for the various types of carriers that you would have available. So you can request this information from us. We'll be happy to provide it for you and save you a lot of time. We keep that updated. And there are other things too that go into this target list that you're going to create for yourself, but that's the first and primary thing. So we'll discuss more on that later, but this is the first thing we need to have in our minds when we're going after commercial lines is, what's our target? What are the markets we're going after, and what are we going to sell? Now, there are two primary quoting methods when you go out and try to sell commercial insurance. One of them's good, one of them's bad. Let's talk about both of them. First off, let's say we have 500 suspects. These are 500 businesses that we want to potentially go after. Now, when I first started, this method on the left is what I used. I'd take 500 suspects, I'd throw them into my hopper, I'd quote 500 suspects, and I'd end up with 500 proposals and 500 quotes. I quoted a lot. I filled out a lot of applications. And I didn't sell very much when I first started. And the reason why is because I wasn't using the method on the right, which we'll talk about now. Same amount of suspects, 500. Again, you've kind of generated a list based off of what you can potentially go after. But after you've gotten those 500 suspects, you take it one step further. Maybe you look some stuff up on Google. Maybe you look at the names of the businesses, because not all things that fit that suspect list are created equal. If you have a list of mechanics, there are a lot of different type of mechanics. There are truck mechanics, personal private vehicle mechanics. Maybe the carriers that you have are fine with fixing Toyota Camrys, but they don't want to fix the brakes on a Peterbilt truck. So in that case, what you want to do is narrow down those 500 suspects into 200 prospects that fit your target markets. So that's the first step. We've already cut this thing down in more than half. But let's take it one step further. After you've had the initial interview with these people, or maybe even if you've just walked in and talked to them for the first time, you get a sense for maybe their relationship with you, or whether or not they have pains that they need addressed, or maybe if they just, quite frankly, can't stand their current agent. You've been able to narrow that down even further based off of relationship, which is a key piece in the whole sales process. Maybe they love their current agent. Maybe it's their brother-in-law or something, and they know that they're going to tick off their spouse if they switch. That would be an example of one that you want to walk away from, but we'll talk more about that later. In that case, that would obviously be one that you'd kick out, whereas one that you think you have a good chance of, you'd leave on the list. But what this means is, instead of quoting 500 suspects and ending up with 500 quotes and writer's cramp, what you're going to now have are 100 proposals, 100 quotes. So you're doing a fifth of the work. But here's where the good part comes. Other sources, such as the National Alliance of Insurance Education, some personal experience, and also interviewing some of our members, have given us a very clear picture as to the closing ratio between these two models. On the model on the left, the closing ratio is approximately 23%. The model on the right, 76%. Now, I've seen a lot of agencies dip their toe into commercial lines insurance, and a lot of them pull it right back out and quit and just get super frustrated, because when you're only selling 1 out of 4 times that you quote, and I understand from personal experience, there are a lot of applications with commercial insurance, and nothing's more frustrating than when you're spending nights filling out applications only to sell 1 out of 4. It's extremely frustrating. A lot of people just bail. They just get right out of it. But when you're closing 3 out of 4 on average, it's a totally different experience. It's exhilarating. And that one that you didn't get just makes you really want to try harder for the next time. And so it's just a totally different model. 2 models, vastly different. And unfortunately, the one on the left is the most frequently used by people who get in and get out of commercial insurance. Now, depending on your lifestyle, you may see something in this ink blot here. Let me see if I can make this a little clearer here. Oh yeah, there we go. There's a little phrase I'd like to say about these 2 models. One of them's the beer mug on the left, and one of them's the martini glass on the right. Both will get you where you want to go, but one will just get you there faster. So when you think of these 2 models, think of this, if you will. Sorry it's cheesy, but it's very accurate. You're going to end up a lot more satisfied with the martini glass model by narrowing down your prospect or your suspects into prospects, identifying those relationships, and quoting a fifth of what you would have on the beer mug model, and ending up with a heck of a lot better closing ratio. So that's the model that we want to keep in our minds when we're out and we see all these suspects that we can go after. Okay, let's talk about the marketing process itself. There are essentially 7 steps that you need to take that are going to lay the groundwork or the foundation for your marketing system. The first one is developing that target market. Now, I talked initially about targeting based off of your carrier hit list. These are the types of businesses that your carriers have told you, we sell these. When we quote them, we sell them. And we have that chart for you, so definitely let us know. We keep it updated, and we'll provide that to you. But the second thing is there are other things that you want to go after too. And, one of the things is your agency strength. Maybe you have someone in your agency or a particular location or background that give you a strength or knowledge that'll help you sell one class of business over another. Definitely consider that as part of what types of businesses you want to target. The next thing is your very own producer strengths. Maybe you have a hobby you're interested in. Maybe you have a former occupation that gives you knowledge about a particular class of business. I've seen a former contractor be one of the best commercial line salespeople I've ever seen. And this individual went straight from being a contractor to an insurance agent, started in selling, guess what, contractor insurance, artisan contractor business, and made a huge living on it. In fact, I know another guy who is a pro bass fisherman, and he ends up selling a bunch of people on the pro bass tour custom boat insurance. These are things that are definitely strengths that you want to tap into. They only add to your arsenal and add to your laser focus of the target businesses that you're going to go after. And then another thing that's important also is to determine what are the usual pains of this particular type of business. Because you want to keep that in the back of your mind as you're developing this as well, because maybe you can provide a unique solution. Maybe you're an exceptional service person, and if service is a pain that typically this business doesn't have addressed, maybe you can use that as a selling point and another reason to go after that class of business. And finally, it's important to evaluate your current competition. I'm spending some time on this first step, but it's probably the most important one. And one of the best words of wisdom I ever heard from a commercial lines agent that was extremely successful was know when to walk away. And in this particular example that I'm referencing in my brain here, he came to me and painted this picture of this risk. It was a used car dealership, and it just seemed perfect. He said, it's like $60,000 a premium, hadn't had any losses, and et cetera, et cetera. He's like, man, it just hurts me to walk away from this one. And I said, well, man, why are you walking away from this? He said, well, the carrier that it's with right now, I just don't think I can beat them. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can't. So I'm going to walk away, and if something changes in the future, then I'm going to come back to it, and I'll save it in my database. And then I asked him at that point, what's one of the most important things that you think, because you're very successful at commercial lines, and on a separate occasion, he actually had told me knowing when to walk away, he felt was the most important thing. Because so many times producers waste so much time quoting something that they don't have a chance to write. Maybe it isn't on their target marketing list. Maybe it is on their target marketing list, but it's currently with a carrier that they can't beat. Maybe they don't have the producer strength, or maybe the risk has a good relationship with their current agent. These are things that you need to identify initially, and they need to be built into your target program from the ground up, and it'll ensure a lot more success. Step number 2, obtain the suspect leads. There are many different ways to get these leads online. Sales Genie is one that comes to mind. Info USA is who powers Sales Genie. Probably one of the primary methods of getting leads. It'll provide you with the owner's name, the address, the phone number, the number of employees in the business. But there are other systems out there too. Depending on your state, you might have the ability to use Data Lister. Data Lister actually takes the work comp expiration dates and the current carrier with work comp, and it stores it in a database because it's all recorded by the state. Now this gives you an advantage because you know when the policy comes up for renewal. So you need to check and see if Data Lister is available. The leads are a little more expensive, but sometimes, depending on your strategy, it may actually save you more money in the long run because you won't be driving around calling on businesses that don't expire for another year. Again, I would preface all that though with the fact that the 6 agencies that were very successful with commercial lines that I interviewed, none of them used Data Lister. In fact, most of them just hadn't heard about it. Whether or not they use it going forward, I don't know, but most of them just use some sort of a lead system or through networking after they've built up their existing client base. But the bottom line is Sales Genie, Data Lister, and many other lead systems out there are readily available, and you do need to start somewhere. Now, when you search for your suspects and you get the lead list, just remember, you're looking for the businesses. You're generating the lead list based off of the businesses that fit your target program, your target markets, based off of the point we talked about earlier. Second, create a database. You need to put these somewhere. Now, when Mike Meacham first started in insurance, he said his database was a yellow piece of paper, and that worked great for him. When I first started, I used an Excel spreadsheet, and that worked great for me. Many people have used those methods and it didn't work. It just depends on the individual. Some people use Salesforce. Some people use Act. Some people use Goldmine. A lot of agents use the sales campaign built right into their agency management system. From an operations perspective, that's a great idea because then all the data is in there for you when you go to sell the person. But the main thing is here, you need to use one that's going to work for you, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. Other ways to get leads are referrals, and I really want to be careful using that word because so many times people just throw that out. It's completely worthless if you're just simply asking for a referral at the end of a sale by saying, do you know anybody else who might need to save money on insurance? That's kind of a open-ended generic question that people are used to saying, well, if I think of anybody, I'll let you know. What I'm talking about for referrals is this. When you go and you sell that customer and they're on that high because they just met a new friend, you just saved them a bunch of money, or you just helped cure a lot of pains that they had, you have a list pre-generated that have types of businesses that fit your target market that you were going to call on anyway that are associated with that particular person you just sold. So let me explain. Let's say you just sold a plumber. You know that plumber probably knows other plumbers. They probably do business with plumbing wholesalers. They probably know some tile workers. Maybe they know some electricians. Whoever you think maybe fit in their network. And what you do is you go to your suspect list or your prospect list, and you create a separate sheet of paper that has these particular classes that are associated with this person you just sold. When you are selling the person at the end, you say, hey, by the way, I've got this list of people that I'm going to be calling on in the next few weeks. Do you know of anybody on this list, that I should stay away from or particularly talk to, someone that you might be familiar with? And almost always, as they see the people names on the list, they're telling you, oh, yeah, I know this guy. We go back, and yeah, you want to stay away from this person. And then at the end, you can ask them, is it cool if I mention that I work with you? That, a lot of times, will give you that warm lead, that warm foot in the door, to be able to refer back to that other person. And that's what I mean by referrals. And that has been a very powerful tool for some of the most successful commercial salespeople out there. And then finally, as I mentioned before, in creating a database, you have to have a system that works for you. The bottom line is there's a billion different ways to do it. But what you need to determine is, based off of your personality profile that we're happy to go over with you, you need to find the system that's going to work for you. So whether it's super advanced or super simplistic, as long as it gets you to follow up with the customer when their policy's coming up for renewal, or as long as it gets you to, take that next step, whether the next step in the process is the proposal, and the next step in the process is to follow up and see where the quote is. This is something that's going to do the work for you or keep you on track so that you don't miss a beat along the way. Number 3, refine your suspects into prospects. And just to be repetitive, match against your program criteria. Double check. After you get that big list of suspects, run it through the filter like I mentioned before. Check it out on Google, look at the names. If you can determine, this isn't quite the type of business that I intended for my target marketing list, kick that thing out. You don't want to waste time walking into some place when you can use that time to walk into another place, or have more time for research and examining your current prospects. Number 4, determine your marketing strategy. And I say your marketing strategy because every strategy is different. Now, surprisingly enough, the 6 agencies that I had interviewed all used the same strategy for the most part. There were minor differences between them, but I was actually shocked. I really expected there to be a greater variety. But actually, they used the 4th point in this list that I'm going to give you here almost primarily or exclusively. But, number 1, direct mail. This is obviously a part of the strategy. None of the agencies I had actually talked to use direct mail anymore. Some of them said when they first started they did. It's kind of a way for you to set up the prospects before you go visit them. But a lot of people say, they didn't get a return on the direct mail, and people, when I went in and visited them, didn't even know that I had sent them the mail. It's kind of just, it's there. Sometimes it helps set you up a little bit, and sometimes it helps give you a little confidence. So it's definitely something that you want to consider as part of your strategy, but by no means is that required. Next, telemarketing. This is important because some places don't have a storefront. Now, you need to determine whether or not that's a type of business you want to go after, because something that you do need to factor in is how much time does it take for you to get a quote, make a sale, and how much premium is that risk going to generate? Is it going to cover those costs? If it's a place that doesn't have a storefront, it may not be large enough for you to warrant even calling on them. However, there are definitely exceptions to that rule, and so if you need to telemarket because maybe that place is out of your territory and it's too far to drive for efficiency purposes, or maybe you've just got some time but not to leave the office, telemarketing is a good option, or maybe it's a place that doesn't have a storefront and it's a valid business to go after, that's where telemarketing is going to come in and is also an effective method. Networking. This is very productive if you have a large network of friends or people in the commercial industries that will help give you, a warm lead or a foot in the door when you're going to call on people. You've essentially, by this process, as long as it fits your target program, you've went all the way from the step 1 of the martini glass model down to the neck of the glass, because you know that there's a relationship piece already built in. So that's a very effective model. or method. Another way that you can use networking is to attend association meetings or to join associations for a particular class that fits your program. Also a great idea, and networking is very useful in those situations. Now, the fourth point that I alluded to in the beginning, which was almost primarily or exclusively used by the most successful commercial agencies that I talk to, is cold calling. In fact, I tried a lot of different ways of getting commercial lines business when I was selling commercial lines exclusively, and I personally found that cold calling was the only way that really worked for me, and it's really the only way that worked for other people that I interviewed. Did they like it? No. Do they like it? Not really sometimes. Again, everyone's different. Some people love cold calling, but a lot of times it's probably maybe one of the most uncomfortable parts of this whole process. However, knowing that you're going in, knowing that you're going to help these people potentially, knowing that you have a fantastic product to offer and fantastic service to offer does make that a lot better. If you have issues with the cold calling process, I would encourage you to let us know, just because we've been there and done that and are doing that, and so we've picked up some tricks along the way that also help in that. But the bottom line is this: when you're in front of someone and you're asking them when their policy expires, they're a lot more apt to tell you when their policy expires and for you to come back and get that follow-up interview than if you're calling them on the phone or sitting in your office after sending out a flyer waiting for the phone to ring. It just doesn't happen. Cold calling is really, of all the agencies that are selling commercial lines, the primary and most effective way of getting new business for commercial. Step number 5. Determine the strategy focus. What is your goal when you are out calling or prospecting new customers? Goal number 1, target 90 days before the expiration date. That's your game plan. You want to know when is the expiration date, because your goal is to have an interview appointment 90 days before that date. So, 2 reasons for the 90 days. First off, nothing is more frustrating than trying to crunch in a quote with 3 days, filling out applications, only to find out, the day of that you're trying to scramble to get these quotes back. Half the carriers have already been blocked. They've already gotten a quote from another agency, so they can't provide you with a quote. The other carriers say they don't have time to quote it, so you're stuck with maybe one haphazard quote that you've got from 2 carriers or 1 carrier, and you're basically slopping something together in little or no time with no mental rehearsal, no focus, no proposal, and you give it this piece of junk to them. So basically you've burned your bridge for next year when you did have a valid shot at it, and when you go back to them next year, in their mind they've got this memory of you giving them this piece of junk quote that wasn't competitive. It's just a terrible idea. In fact, it's one of the reasons why a lot of personal lines agents stay personal lines. Because when they think of commercial, they think of all those times that they couldn't make a sale because they didn't have enough time to quote, but they didn't really realize it. They just thought, oh, well, I can never get a competitive quote. The carrier's markets are always blocked. The commercial lines carriers take so long to get me quotes back. I never have a competitive market. Well, all that ties into the fact that the people that have walked through their door need a quote in a week, need a quote in 3 days, and they're basically stuck trying to run a sprint up a mountain when in reality it needs to be hiked up and carefully planned. 90 days gives you plenty of time to get your quote in first, block the other agents out of the market, prepare a proposal, do mental rehearsals, research the risk. It gives you a chance to sell the commercial lines client. And it gives you a chance to assess whether or not it's someone you should even be quoting. Now, targeting that in mind in that interview appointment is going to be the key. If you walk into a business and they say, my policy comes up in a week and I would just love you if you got me a quote, I would love it. You'd be my best friend forever. Walk away. If you only have 7 days, if you only have 3 days, if you only have 15 or 20 days, walk away. Unless it's something that you know because of experience that you can quote and get the amount of quotes you need to get a competitive quote, and have enough time to do the rehearsal and have enough time to get your proposal together, unless you know this based off of experience, for that particular type of business, walk away. That's simple as it gets there. Otherwise, I warned you. Number 6, create your sales tools. What are you going to use when you walk in to get that appointment interview? Now, there are a lot of different things you could do. Agency brochures, things talking about your agency strengths, your business card, carrier or marketing brochures. I should have put flyers instead of brochures on here. Personally, I like flyers because they don't have to physically open them. A lot of times you'll notice when you go in to ask for when their policy expires, they just look at the front of the brochure for a while, waiting obviously for you to leave, and then they throw it away. If you give them a flyer, they're looking at the flyer, and what I like about that is I try to put sentences on there that are short enough that they accidentally read them while they're staring off into space answering your questions, because they're trying to avoid eye contact sometimes. What that does is it ingrains certain messages in their head, so that when you come back after 90 days prior to the expiration date, they've got those messages in their head associated with your voice or your face. I just kind of like that. It might be a little philosophical and not actually true, but that's just my 2 cents. When I interviewed these other agencies that were really successful, primarily they just took in a business card. They said that the one thing they didn't want to do is look like a salesperson. I think they never said it, but I think they really feel like for them, they're more like doctors. I mean, they're going in there, they're trying to find the pains, and they're trying to address those pains and help these people. And when they walk in with like a whole stack of flyers or a whole stack of brochures or a big old portfolio, they just kind of look like the Yellow Page ad salesperson. That being said, if you walk in with a flyer or walk in with a brochure, obviously there was nothing against that, but a lot of them just used a business card just because it was a little bit more casual. Again, everybody's sales style is different. You need to determine what's going to make you confident, because confidence is everything. I even had at one point, I really liked leaving a magnet business card. I don't know how many of them got thrown away, but I always envisioned them going prominently featured right up on their office fridge, but I don't know if that's the case. PreApproach. This is what you need to do before you have your interview that we'll cover in the next of the series. And also, it's a good idea to do this before you obviously even go out to start calling on people to get that initial interview. And just to clarify, there's the initial call. I call it the initial call, when you first walk into a business to try to get an appointment or get an interview. And then that's basically when you ask them for their expiration date, and hopefully you get the expiration date. That's mission number 1, get the expiration date. Mission number 2 is get an interview, and we'll talk about that in the next of the series. But before you do those things, it's a good idea to research your prospects. Maybe you've got 20 different types of businesses or 10 different types of businesses on your prospect list. You need to research those businesses, kind of understand, you don't need to know how to do this stuff, but just kind of get an idea of what are the types of things that go into this business, what are the types of coverages, that maybe they're going to need, what are some things insurance-wise that I can potentially, present to them so that they can, I can maybe identify some pains even before they tell me. So those are the things that you want to do first. You want to research. You want to kind of have a little bit of a game plan in your head before you go in. Don't research to death, though. I mean, I know some people that sit there and research for a year before they make one call. Obviously, it's a game of numbers, so you got to get out there. But researching the prospect is an important part. And then the second thing is, before you do the initial call or before you do the initial interview, it's always a good idea to have a mental rehearsal. Whether you're doing it in the car before you walk in, or whether you do it in the office, or even just thinking about it, you got to get that little pitch down. And we'll go over that pitch. Everybody's is different, but we'll go over some ideas for that pitch in the next of the series. So those are the 7 steps in the marketing process. And I'm going to make this available to you, so if you want to watch it again, you can. But the main thing is, take notes that make sense to you. because everybody's sales style is different, and everybody's approach is a little different. And what we want to do is try to determine, what is your style that's going to work the best for you. And then all you got to do from that point is get out there and do it. And we'll do everything we can to help you be successful. So at this point, we're going to open it up for questions, if anybody has any. And I really appreciate everyone attending this webinar and appreciate any feedback. And so please direct the feedback or questions to myself or someone in the office that will be able to assist you. And we're excited to have you on board. Thanks so much.